Hi there folks, welcome to Flipping Heck Business, Flip Learning for AQA A-Level Business Studies. This is video number 5 and today we're going to be looking at PESTLE. So what we will cover is PESTLE analysis. So what you need to know is how PESTLE links to external environments, which will be continued in video 6, what PESTLE actually means and what factors are included within it. So to understand PESTLE, you first of all have got to understand that all businesses operate in what we call the external environment. Now, this external environment is basically that all businesses operate with factors that they can't really control. So these might be things such as economic factors, so how the economy is actually doing in a country, whether people have got spending power, etc. Demographic, so these are like where we've got, say, an aging population. Market factors, so again it could be any kind of regulations that might be coming into play. So if you think like the sugar tax coming into certain soft drinks. And then we've got environmental and social factors as well. So as we understand our own carbon footprint in the world, we can see the pollution that is actually being formed. Well, we might put pressure onto companies to actually fall in line and be a bit more environmentally friendly. So the best businesses will usually take a very proactive stance on this. So they'll anticipate any changes to the environment and they will minimize the impact and try and take advantage of it. So basically they become proactive as opposed to reactive, which would mean that they would react only when the external environment changes. So the best way of actually analysing this is to create what we call a PESTLE report. So these are the factors. It is political, economic, social, technological, ethical or environmental, and then legal factors. Now, most big companies will actually have this. If you go on Google and look for McDonald's PESTLE analysis, you will find that they have been done for Coca-Cola, for anyone really, certainly a lot of the PLCs. So first of all, we look at political. So these are the kind of factors that you'd be expecting them to cover. So it'd be things like government tax policies, any regulations that might be coming into play. So for example, if they change the corporation tax in the UK, then this would be a major political change for a business. It could be that business regulation policies and incentives are coming in. So as we are moving away into a Britain coming out of the EU, so the UK coming out of the EU, then you'll find that a lot of incentives might be put onto companies to actually stay within our actual country. Regulation by the industry. So we talked about sugar tax coming into play. It could be any kind of new regulation in food industry, in clothing industry. And then we've also got the government competition policy. So this is kind of stating that you need to actually take into account that you can't create like a monopoly. So if we look at the big four in supermarkets, then recently there's been a change where Sainsbury's and Asda were looking to merge into one. Well, in order for them to actually do that, it has to go through a whole process where it needs to be agreed with by the government that they would be actually allowed to do that. Because if they had, then they would have created one super company, which actually would have taken the top spot over the top of Tesco. Right? So that was Sainsbury's and Asda. Just double check on that. So economic factors. These are factors that are basically to do with how our economy is doing. So things like our currency value, our exchange rates, so how strong the pound is against other exchange rates, certainly very important for any kind of international or global company. Now, with England, with the UK coming out of the EU, what we actually saw was a big dip in the value of the pound. Now this was actually quite important for our companies because this meant that if you were, say, a company operating out of the UK into America, then you might find that any money you make here would not go as far in that other country. Now that would actually be very beneficial for an American company coming over to the UK, where all of a sudden, if they wanted to buy any products or they wanted to pay staff over here, they would actually be technically paying a little bit less. They would actually, their money would be able to go a lot further. So it is a very, very important factor. There were a lot of companies that lost a lot of money, and we are starting to rebuild the pound, but we're not quite there yet, and we'll have to see how that goes. So our national GDP, which is our gross domestic product, now that basically means the total value of all of the goods and services that we produce as a UK. It's a very good measurement of how a country is doing. Now, in lesson, you'll be actually looking at GDP, so be prepared to actually try and find it. Then we've got public spending power. So this could be whether people are highly employed, so it means that they've got more money that they can actually put in. So say, think about your disposable income. Whereas if we've got, like, say, a low employment rate, then you might find that people are trying to tighten their belts, so they won't have as much money to actually spend. And then interest rates, so these are how, like, banks decide how much money you're actually going to pay back if you borrow anything. So usually the Bank of England will set this. It's quite low at the minute, but it can go up as high as 15 or 17%. At the minute it's around about 1.75, no 1.5 to 0.5 to 0.75. Again, this is something that you'll have to look up, and it does change. So social factors, these could be changes in lifestyle and choices. So think about any style. So certainly a company would have to look at what the next seasonal range of clothing is, what lifestyle changes. So are people healthier? So therefore they are moving away from, like, fatty foods. Population demographics and changes. So here again, think about, like, aging population in the UK. Think about like any kind of as people are getting older, then, like, different styles, different lifestyle, different tastes will occur. Have we got less people working because we've got a lot more retired? And then also there's community or pressure groups. So these might be like pressure groups that want a particular change to occur within a business or within a country, and they will put that pressure onto businesses themselves. Technological changes. So think about, like, any kind of new innovation that might be coming out. Are we moving towards getting rid of workers and moving into more of a technologically based like work environment? So is there an improvement in technology? So think about production. Are we more productive because we're able to actually produce things at a much faster rate? Is there a development of mobile technology? So more people are working at home. More people are able to actually work around the world, even though they would have a bigger impact in the UK or up and down the country. People are moving out of London and coming into, like, the northern powerhouse, so such as Manchester, Liverpool, York, and Leeds, also that they actually have, like, a bit more money available to them. And then also we've got big data. Now, big data is quite a complicated one in that it's basically how companies such as Facebook, the government, anyone who collects any kind of data, they will then sell that on to others so that it can be used for marketing purposes, so it can be used for keeping track of the various changes that actually occur in the external environment. Then we've got ethical and environmental decisions, so things like corporate social reports. So these are where companies actually have, like, any kind of ethical background will try and follow certain rules or policies. It could be that they're looking at their supply chains. It could be that they're looking at reducing any kind of pollution. It could be then looking at sustainability. So have they actually got a product that it can be made from sustainable resources or can be made indefinitely? Could be that they look at pollution and carbon emissions as well. So again, if you look at countries like China, then their carbon footprint tends to be very, very high. Whereas in the UK, what are we trying to do? We're moving away from using plastics. We're moving away from using coal. We're moving away to instead use paper straws, for example. Use things that will biodegrade, things that won't just pollute the waterways and the coastline. We're trying to move to sustainable energy. And then we've got environmental protection policies. So these could be anything that the government itself is putting into place. So for example, they're looking at only having the temperature rise by 1.5 degrees instead of 2 degrees by the end of the century, which actually will cause an awful lot of people to keep their homes, as there won't be quite as much flooding or sea level rises, and hopefully won't see the kind of environmental impact that we've been seeing. So the last one is legal. So this would be looking at things like employment laws, so such as making sure that there's equal rights and equality in the workforce. So making sure that there are women working, certainly into higher jobs. Minimum living wage. So think about it. If you've got 10,000 workers working at minimum wage, all of a sudden they put it up by 50p, then that means that every hour that you've got 10,000 workers working for you, you will lose £5,000. So, you have them working 10 hours a day at £50,000 straight away per day that you could lose just because of minimum wage. Living wage is the same. So it could become the company industry, standard industry that you would pay minimum wage. So such as Amazon, McDonald's are looking at the minimum living wage as well. Well, this could put smaller businesses out of business simply because they won't be able to pay their workers that amount. Employment taxation changes. So if there's any change to how people are actually taxed, such as pay as you earn or 0-hour contracts, then this could have a large impact on a business. Health and safety laws. So if there's, for example, Pret-a-Manger are going to have to up their allergen advice. So they've had a couple of deaths over the last couple of years where people have died because they've eaten food that has got nuts or seeds in it. They are allergic to it. Well, it may not have had a clear enough warning label on the food, which means that really the company could be held to blame. And then environmental legislation. So again, we were talking about any kind of policies that might be coming in, minimum amount of carbon footprint that a business can produce, or if you look at car safety levels, then there is only a certain amount of pollution that each one can produce. Well, that may be actually more expensive for those car manufacturing companies. Okay, thank you very much, folks. It was a slightly short video. I hope that you've taken something away from it. So thanks for watching. If you want more information, then hit like and subscribe to Flipping Heck Business. Make sure that you leave constructive criticism below in the comments, and video 6 will follow shortly.